Welcome back to the panel discussion, Government Perspectives on Mobility in the Cloud, sponsored by Microsoft on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. Our guests today are Sylvia Burns, the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Interior, and Susie Adams, the Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft Federal. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Now, before break, we started talking about the changes, how cloud and mobility, the definitions, the expectations are all changing. This is all leading us down a path to apps, the App Store. We hear that almost everybody has some kind of App Store. Even agencies, I think VA just said, plans to put an App Store out there for both doctors and nurses, but also the private sector healthcare world. So let's talk about, when it comes to talking about best practices, mobility, cloud, and intersection, what's happening? What are you seeing that's actually impressive or leading practice? Let me start with Sylvia.
So we do have an app store in the department. It's an internal. And frankly, one of the first things we put out on there that had a huge impact was our time and attendance system. So putting that out there just made it so easy. People didn't have to log in to have a government computer to actually do their time cards every 2 weeks, which was a hugely big deal for people out in the field who had basically temporary workers who come in just for a short amount of time based on the season. And they need to do their time cards. And they didn't necessarily, they would have to wait in line basically and come out of the field to wait in line on a computer, to wait to do their time card on a computer. And we just wiped that away when we heard that feedback, and we put out an app that lets people do their time cards on the web securely.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, if you think about it, how simple that is.
Yeah.
Like something just so obvious. They always compare it to the milk carton when you had to you guys probably remember, you had to push open and you had to push and pull it. I hated that. And then someone thought of the screw top. It's almost very similar to that time. Yeah. Why didn't we just do this years ago? Is that are you getting thank yous for that?
Oh, yeah.
Do people call you up and?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was talking about it just last week to some people who were from the field, and they were like, that was hugely helpful because I had to have people leave what they were doing in the field, which is why I hire them for the season, to come in and wait to do their time card. And he's like, the fact that you guys let us do it that way, they could be out in the field and just still do their time card and be more productive. So
one thing about having an app store and doing some internal apps, I hear a lot about the app development. How are you guys looking at that? What kind of standards and policies? Are you there yet to have something in place to say, well, if you guys are going to develop an app, here's the rules, or is everything really coming from your office?
Well, I wouldn't say that. We developed a mobility strategy that gives high-level guidelines to people about mobility and development, but I wouldn't say that we are being very prescriptive. The Department of the Interior is a very decentralized environment.
Yes, it is. We've all seen that, yes.
And I'd say that there are a lot of creative ideas that come from our field, and I don't know that us driving a single direction would foster that kind of innovation. So.
All right, let me turn to Susie now. From work, we're going to actually wear a third hat. You have your internal Microsoft hat. You're seeing best practices in the federal world. You're probably seeing best practices in the commercial world. At least you hear about them from your colleagues. And then obviously you have internal best practices. Just give us a sense of what you're seeing when with that intersection of cloud and mobility.
So I think, when you talk about using the device of your choice to get access to sensitive or even unsensitive data, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is security, right? First and foremost. And when you go to any IT director, whether you're in the commercial sector, right, or whether you're in the federal government, it's always all about security. And so the same thing for Microsoft. So when our IT directors looked at how do I allow Microsoft employees on a worldwide basis to have remote access on the device of their choice, not just a Windows device, right? Any device. We have Androids, iPhones, right? There's a variety of different devices out there. How do we do this? And what are the rules and regulations and the policies we put in place around this? And so they kind of looked at it from several different vectors. The first vector was let's look at the data that people are accessing, and let's make sure we classify that data. Almost similar to how the federal government looks at classifying data, but we said low impact, moderate impact, and high impact. And now there's actually policies in place that are enforced by technology, by Windows Server, underneath the hood, that basically force you to label these documents if they're stored on the internet. Now, from there, we said, okay, now let's look at the devices. And not all devices are created equal from a security perspective. Some allow you to encrypt data, some support PKI and certificates, some allow you to VPN in, some don't. Some allow you to do things like S-MIME with email. Right? There's a variety of different things that you can do with these different devices and the different operating systems. And so what we did is really create a matrix. And we said, okay, if you're looking at low impact data and you're on this particular device, and then we added a third vector to it and said, and you're on an agency network, or you're VPN'd in, or you're sitting at Starbucks, we basically said you are allowed and aren't allowed to do these things. And then we enforce that policy through technology. So now technically I can use any device. If I had an iPad here, right, running Office on an iPad, and I wanted to go and get access to a document I was working on, perhaps for a customer, a federal customer, that'd be classified high business impact. If I were sitting here right now, unless I VPN'd in or used my smart card, right, to gain access, I wouldn't be able to gain access.
I think it's fascinating you guys developed a matrix. I mean, have you thought about sharing that? Because
we do. We share this with federal customers. We actually have several white papers, not just federal. We share this with our enterprise customers as well. And we've actually taken some of these learnings, because it's been a very long process, well over 10 years for us, and just baked those into our products. So some of these capabilities today, like direct access and the ability to do smart card access, are just baked into our operating systems. Our new Windows Phone has that capability. We now support TPM chips, right inside the Windows Phone, working with our manufacturers. And so I think what you're seeing, and we're clearly not the only ones that do this, right? All the other vendors have now started to learn that software automation is really the key to enabling mobile and cloud connectivity. And if you can use software to do that, along with working with the hardware vendors to employ the right technologies on their devices, you can absolutely secure this data, unlike what we used to think about before, which is really, it was always a one size shoe fits all, right? You're either everybody has access or nobody has access kind of mentality.
Which actually leads us down the path to BYOD, bring your own device. Now at Microsoft, are you there? I mean, is this you have a tablet in front of you here? People can see if they're looking at the video. If not, they're listening to your tablet. But is this your personal device, or is this Microsoft's? How does that work with BYOD?
This is my personal device. We can bring anything we want in. I have an iPad that I connect. You'll admit that, by the way. You'll admit that. That's okay. Absolutely.
Right.
I admit it all the time. In fact, I run Office on it. But if I bring my own device in, it really doesn't matter. I can access it from anywhere on a device. Now, we do look at the health of that device, and we also check to see that it's been patched. There are certain operating systems that we won't allow to do certain things, because we know that the security posture of that device is not up to our standard. But those are all set in policies, and those policies are then not manually enforced, right, by the individual. They're actually enforced through software. And that technology is not really, it's baked into operating systems and solutions that people already own today. You don't have to go out and buy, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of software. In fact, most people already own a lot of it.
From BYOD and Interior's perspective, where are you at with that? Is that a consideration yet, or is that far off?
Well, we actually spent, and I personally spent, probably 2 years seriously looking at it, because when the term came out, we were very intrigued, and we wanted to see if we could take advantage of it. But it was complicated, and I think that we felt that there was the need for some significant investments around security, and that we would need to make internally in order to be able to put a policy like that out. We still keep our eyes open on it, because we're interested in it. There's all sorts of other aspects that we have to consider too, in terms of human resource issues and
there's the
things
liability
around,
piece too.
Yeah.
You lose data if you lose the device.
And things around records management for us, which is it's a hugely big deal for us in the federal government.
I'll tell you, I remember the day very well when Vivek Kundra, the former federal CIO, was at an FCA breakfast, and he talked about BYOD is the future of government. And I remember we came back to the office, and we were kind of mocking him. No way, that's never going to happen. And I will tell the story forever that 2 years later, I admitted I was wrong. I should not have mocked him. I think we're closer to BYOD than ever before, just because I think the acceptance in the cloud and the security and things like that. when we talk about applications, though, because once you have plenty of legacy applications, you need to mobilize them, if that's a new word we can use. Can you talk a little bit about that process or those challenges of taking legacy apps and saying, okay, how do we make sure that they can be useful and present nicely and do all those things on a smaller screen and mobile device? Sylvia, start, please.
Sure. I mean, I think that is very much about our ability to invest in new development, because really the legacy, so we have legacy systems that are decades old at the Department of the Interior. And on one hand, there have to be decisions that are made there about whether there's a business case to make a change, right? But where there is, I think then it's about making investment, right, to rewrite the code and make it more modern, make it more accessible mobily, you know? So it's part of that whole strategy that needs to be looked at.
So one of the things that Susie said earlier is that kind of the idea of lift and shift, taking it from the servers and put it into the cloud. Does that make things any easier when it comes to mobile apps, or is that you still have the legacy, whether it's written in COBOL or written in old versions of C++ or my coding? That's about all I know about coding. But you know what I mean? Like,
I think it definitely makes things easier. That's why our cloud contract is so important for us, because it can help us wholesale move. Where you can get mired into an internal process of trying to redevelop a legacy system, and the best thing may be just to kind of jump over the whole thing and try to see if you can get a vendor to help you move it to the cloud and just change the whole paradigm.
Susie, let me turn to you. When you talk to CIOs, when you talk to program managers, and they were wanting to go mobile, but they have that operation and maintenance, the CapEx, OpEx, whatever the current term is that people use around to describe how much money goes into old systems versus new systems. Are they trying to move? Are you starting to see that movement happen where they're saying we can find the money to get that application because it makes sense for our business, for our citizens, for our employees?
We do. We actually see a lot of effort being put into what's now being called application rationalization, is going and looking not only at my IT assets, or my physical servers, networks, and data centers, but also looking at the applications and trying to look at these and say, okay, which ones are mission critical, which ones make sense from a business perspective to move, and which ones don't need to be moved, and maybe they can just be virtualized and published. Right, to a web-based interface so that it can be viewed and used on any device through a web browser. And that technology is readily available today, and people do it all the time for important legacy systems that just don't make sense. It would be too time-consuming and to actually move them. I think the key here, though, is I think we're changing the way applications are actually delivered, because now it really matters. I mean, how do you keep that application up to date? We're so used to having an IT department. You plug into your network, that IT department, Big Brother comes down and they try to manage it, and you have some kind of software out there in the sky that manages this, your desktop. Or somebody comes along in the old, and not so old, because I know it still happens in the federal government, walks around and makes sure that, or you give it to your device to your IT department, and they make sure that it's up to speed with the latest image. And I think that's changing. You're starting to see even the way major software vendors are delivering software today. They're doing it through app stores. We're even doing it with Office. We have something called Click to Run. We no longer deliver a disk, right, to you. We actually stream that software down and update it real time so that you can make sure that it's updated, regardless of the device you're using, whether it's mobile or an iPad or whatever that device is.
Does this mean we can see in the vision 3 to 5 years from now, Patch Tuesday will go away?
I'm not going to go that far.
We will miss Patch Tuesday.
I think Patch Tuesday's around for a while.
Well, that's the key.
It's a very good practice.
It's sort of like how it's happening, because, what Susie's making me think about is virtual desktop and virtual application technology, which it just changed the whole paradigm, because what you end up doing, like the way VDI works, is really the user has access to their desktop, and it can be through any device. But it's kind of like through a plexiglass, because really all the infrastructure is sitting in the back, and there's a team of people who are managing that infrastructure and delivering up whatever mobile apps or whatever they need to do their work. But it just lends so much flexibility, and it allows us to at the same time standardize and keep costs down at the infrastructure level.
Susie,
we're actually seeing people. They're looking at VDI, and then they're starting to realize that it's not, again, a one-size-shoe-fits-all. That they're categorizing their information workers, and they're saying, okay, this small category of people, because VDI can get very expensive from a physical infrastructure perspective and network perspective to support, and they're starting to say, wow, why don't I take these applications and we'll do application virtualization for these pieces, and we'll create a generic image right, that those end users can use from anywhere, and then the applications are just delivered to them in a very different manner, and their data is actually even synchronized in a very different manner. And so I think the moral of the story here is it isn't a one-size-shoe-fits-all anymore. You actually have to look at this from all those vectors, right, and define and decide what's best for each, classification of data, categorization of worker, the device that you're using, and then update it as these devices, right, and software products come out.
What's interesting when you talk about VDI or virtual applications, I'm not hearing as much about virtualizing applications as I am hearing VDI. And actually, zero client and thin clients seem to be very popular among the CIOs I speak with. Are you guys down that path of VDI yet, Sylvia?
Yes. Not as much as I'd like to see. And of course, we have all of our bureaus and offices kind of run their desktops separately. Some of them are more advanced than others, but it's definitely a trend that I see continuing.
Because we're almost out of time for this segment, but when I come back, I want to get into the security question. So let me just start with this, and I'll turn to Susie, and then we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and continue the conversation on security. But one of the big benefits I'm hearing about VDI, thin clients, zero clients, whatever you want to talk about, is that security piece, is that you can patch more quickly. I know I made the joke about Patch Tuesday, but you can patch more quickly, and you can have better security. Is that a key piece to this whole concept of cloud mobility integration?
It can be with VDI. I can say you're actually just moving your challenge, right? You always are going to have the challenge of keeping that desktop up to date and making sure it's patched. Whether you do it centrally or decentrally, or it's decentralized, it's really the question. And so you still have to do it. And so it really depends. I don't think it's the same for every single agency. I think some agencies that are more decentralized, it might make more sense. Some that aren't already, it doesn't really give them the benefit that they're looking for.
All right, well, we have to take a quick break. You're listening to the panel discussion, Government Perspectives on Mobility in the Cloud, sponsored by Microsoft on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.